If you're a racist, you're a racist. You're not really listening to reason.
Anyone who's brown, foreign, has an accent is viewed with suspicion by some small segments of increasingly vocal and powerful minority in American politics.
They think they're losing something, when in reality, they're really not losing anything because they never had a chance to be the Microsoft CEO.
H-1B visa holders are incredibly important contributors to the U.S. economy.
When it comes down to, who's on their side, they look at skin color first, not anything else.
I can live in America the rest of my life, the vast majority of my life, and I'll never be a true American.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Tracking Trump on DeKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Well, as Donald Trump completes 1 year in office in his second term, a shift that we have seen during his last year in his presidency has been a sort of rising backlash against the Indian American community. Now, there is generally a sort of anti-immigrant sentiment that we see in America at the moment, but the Indian American community has till now been largely immune to that. Indian Americans have lived in the US for decades. They have contributed enormously to America's economy, to innovation, and it shows. You can see some of the biggest companies in the US, from Google to Microsoft to Pepsi, have been headed by Indian Americans at some point or another. They've done so much in technology, engineering, medicine, innovation. In fact, an interesting statistic is that when you look at the median household income of different groups in the United States, Indian Americans have the highest median household income, even higher than an average American household. So that tells you how well they've been doing. They've also had more political clout in recent years. We've seen more and more Indian Americans enter the US Congress, even run for president. So they're far more prominent as a community. But then something has started to shift under Trump 2.0. We are seeing increasing statements from Republican leaders, from Trump's cabinet, from the MAGA leadership, targeting the Indian American community, particularly the H-1B visas. And that's now beginning to manifest itself in the day-to-day lives of Americans who live in the US. To take us through this, today on the program, we have Professor Irfan Nooruddin. He's a professor at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and journalist and author Ray Locker is back with us on the program today. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today. Professor Nooruddin, I wanted to ask you first, why is this happening? Are you sensing a greater animus, as the New York Times wrote just days ago, against Indian Americans, even those who've lived in the US for a very long time?
Indian Americans, as you said, Nidhi, have enjoyed a somewhat privileged status among immigrant groups to the United States, largely on part of fluency in English, right? Generally, very highly educated in critical sectors. You mentioned medicine, you mentioned technology, higher education, where I sit. And so that has in some ways insulated Indian Americans from the broader ethos, or broader sort of, strains of xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment that often rise in American politics. They're always present, but at some points they become more prominent than others. I think it's important to contextualize. On the one hand, I think, as you point out, there is just generally a growth in anti-immigrant sentiment. In many ways, Indian Americans are simply collateral damage in that. They're being caught up in a world in which anyone who's brown, foreign, has an accent is viewed with suspicion by some small segments of increasingly vocal and powerful minority in American politics. But as you point out, there's also a targeted attention to Indian Americans. And I think this is because of the H-1B policy being used as a scapegoat in a broader set of conversations about American protectionism, how do we create American jobs, and the H-1B visa is being used as a shorthand for the abuse of the U.S. immigration system, alleged abuse of the U.S. immigration system by foreigners who are trying to come into the country, take advantages and not give anything back. Now, on the facts of this is completely silly. H-1B visa holders are incredibly important contributors to the U.S. economy, but it does make Indian Americans, who are the single largest holder of H-1B visas, uniquely vulnerable, because suddenly they get caught up in a anti-visa, anti-immigration, anti-foreign worker kind of mindset and get lumped together in that. I will finally say that I think that one of the interesting things that I to talk about with Mr. Locker is that the very success, the economic success of Indian Americans also makes them in some ways a target, right? I mean, so it is both sort of like you're both the poster child for success, but you're also sort of the poster child for look at all these people who've come, done extremely well, and now they're doing even better than native-born white Americans, etc. And this causes its own backlash and resentment.
But the thing is, and Mr. Locker, if you could come in on that, I'm sure there is an understanding somewhere amongst the American people that yes, of course, Indian Americans have individually done well, but they've also contributed so much to the American economy. The companies that they've headed that has led to greater employment opportunities for Americans as well. So. Is that getting lost in all the noise that we're hearing from the MAGA-verse right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that reality has ever sunk in with the MAGA crowd. I mean, if you're a racist, you're a racist. You're not really listening to reason. It's obvious that Indian Americans have made huge contributions to this society. I mean, they're a net benefit. Immigration is a net benefit to the United States. But you have to remember, a lot of people in this country, they grew up, in a time in the 70s, 80s, where we had a very low percentage of foreign born people in the United States. I mean, it's shocking. Go back and watch, a movie from the 50s and 60s. You don't see any people of color. And for a lot of Americans, that's their frame of reference. So when they look around and they see, Indian Americans who are leading Microsoft and other tech companies and, taking jobs, and they're like, what's going on here? It makes them feel uncomfortable. It stimulates their racism, just like the election of Barack Obama stimulated more racism. So, I mean, I think that's part of the world that you see. It doesn't make sense to anybody who's really educated, but that's just the way that these people think. They think they're losing something, when in reality, they're really not losing anything because they never had a chance to be the Microsoft CEO or to be a coder somewhere. They don't have those skills, and they resent the people who do, particularly if they look different from white Americans.
But the interesting thing here is that this racism that we're seeing now so openly has clearly been fueled by Trump's return to office, and it's being led by his own cabinet members, his own people. To what end? And do you not think that it also reeks of hypocrisy? The vice president's wife is of Indian origin; she's an immigrant. And she's proud of it. So there's such a sort of a huge double standard here as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everybody comments on the fact that Usha Vance is the Indian American. You have the vice president who's spouting all of this racist stuff. And look at his own home, his wife, his children. I mean, every time he does something that's racist, it reflects badly on him, and it points the finger at his family in a way that I don't think any caring person would want. But that's what happens when you embrace that world. Look at Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, I personally think he's a con man, doesn't have any business being governor of Ohio, but they rolled over and let him, the Republicans in Ohio, let him be their putative nominee. And he goes and says, look, we don't need to be doing all this racist stuff. And they attack him because he's never going to be one of them. Because when it comes down to, who's on their side, they look at skin color first, not anything else. And if you're not a white person in that world, you're not one of them, no matter what you say or what you believe in.
So, Professor Nooruddin, how is this affecting, I mean, your friends, your other Indian American friends? What are the conversations like at the moment? And in terms of also the way the Indian American community has also changed so much in the last couple of decades. They're much more prominent now, as I said, politically and otherwise. And many of them also, I think, wear their Indianness much more on their sleeve. Maybe not as much as they used to once upon a time for various reasons. How are they looking at this? How are you all looking at this?
Yeah, it's a profound question, and it really cuts to the core of identity, right? I mean, for so many of us, uh, we one of the wonderful things about America at its very best is it allows people to come and live and be American, but also to have a sense of rootedness even in the countries that they left behind, the home, right? And so the diasporic communities of the United States are unique in sort of often embracing a hyphened identity. We have German Americans, Scottish Americans, Irish Americans, Mexican Americans, Indian Americans, the list goes on. And I think right now you're feeling and talking a lot in conversation with friends, with my students who come from India or Indian American, a sense that they're not really any longer feeling very secure over here. And there's a sense of vulnerability, right? We've gone from a world in which, okay, I came here when I was to the United States when I was 19 after college, junior college in Bombay. Went to college here, got my PhD, have had a wonderful life in many ways. But all of a sudden, the conversations and the sense when I'm going through immigration at an airport, coming back from a trip, is the once again reminder that, because of my name, because of the color of my skin, because of the fact that, as Mr. Locker said, for many people, I can live in America the rest of my life, the vast majority of my life, and I'll never be a true American. That I'm vulnerable to certain kinds of scrutiny by an immigration officer, that I'm particularly vulnerable to being stopped on the streets by immigration enforcement, for instance. So that vulnerability, the sense of, just a stability in what you began to think of as home being shattered is pretty frightening, it's pretty depressing. You also have, for I think, young Indian Americans and young Indians, right, who come here, they have a different relationship to home because the economic opportunities in India are so incredibly vibrant today that for many of them, unlike my generation that imagined coming to the US and then staying in the US, they imagine coming to the US, maybe spending part of their career here, but eventually ending up back in Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Madras, Chennai, wherever it is, right? But now I think what they're seeing is that, wow, I did all the work. I came to the US, I'm in these prestigious universities, and all of a sudden I'm being told that if I get an H-1B visa, I'm a scourge on the society, that getting H-1B visas is going to be extremely difficult, that getting job interviews is going to be very difficult. So why bother coming to the United States in the first place? And I think that for them has sort of really shattered, whatever illusion of the American dream once existed, because no longer does it seem like you come and work hard and you too can succeed. It really is, you're being viewed and portrayed as being a negative drag on the U.S. economy.
You're absolutely right, because there is a very telling statistic. This year, university admissions from India to the US have dropped by 44% as per the latest data as compared to last year. So that tells you something. And I find that particularly sad because, Professor Nooruddin, one always felt that the India-US relationship, no matter what its ups and downs over the years, and there have been more ups generally, the people-to-people relationship, this whole Indians going to study there, the best research is still at American universities, the best faculty is still at American universities. So the fact that Indian students are now looking at alternatives, I'm sure as a professor yourself, you find that sad.
It is extremely sad, and as Mr. Locker pointed out in his remarks, it is really America shooting itself in the foot, right? I mean, the strength of the American higher education system is the envy of the world. I say that without any sort of hubris as a member of that higher education system. It's an objective fact. It has allowed America to attract talent from around the world, including in very large numbers India. But, we're actively destroying the very base of the innovation and technology that has made America a superpower. So the simple fact of the matter is, right, that physics, engineering, biology, chemistry, think of your natural sciences, think of the most advanced computer science labs in the United States. All of those PhD programs, all of those graduate programs are going to be absolutely devastated if you can't attract the top international talent to them, right? I mean, there simply aren't the kind of quality of students coming domestically. What has made these departments so incredible, from the West Coast to the East Coast, from the North to the South, is that they can draw talent from around the world. We're talking about India right now, but I would have to say that Chinese American and Chinese students coming to the United States have already been damaged by this. They were an incredible asset to many universities, and those numbers have also plummeted because for all the abuse that Indians might be receiving, Chinese migrants to the United States, that's been a thousandfold kind of thing. But all of that is a net negative for the United States. And unfortunately, there is this sense of fear on the part of universities to really push back against this by the Trump administration, because, of course, the Trump administration has shown in the second term a willingness to target universities in particular, right, and silence them. And we've read all about these high-level prosecutions and the deals being reached, etc. One small irony, because I want to make sure we're being completely honest with the record, the persecutions and prosecutions of the universities uh, in the current administration is being led by the Department of Justice by Dillon, right, who is in fact an Indian American. But this prominence of Indian Americans in the American political scene does include a number of prominent Indian Americans who have, in fact, thrown in their lot with the Trump administration. Kash Patel at the FBI, Harmeet Dillon at the Department of Justice. And so there is, I think, this really interesting conundrum of Indian Americans being comfortable that they were not, in fact, the kind of bad immigrant uh, they sort of join forces, and only to find maybe now that some of that same xenophobia, that same racism is being targeted against their own community. So there's a little internal reckoning that we
That's an
have to
excellent,
do in our
which explains the
complicities here.
Ramaswamis and the Nikki Haley's, of the world, who are, part of the Republican Party and the setup. And, as Ray Locker pointed out, they can only go so far and no further in this MAGA-verse. I was actually going to say the irony also is that, even amongst Indian American voters in the US, we've seen a shift where, more of them actually liked Trump. They shifted away from the Democratic Party because they liked Trump, and because they're also fans of Mr. Modi, and they thought that, well, this is a great friendship, and
And you see
how
this,
that.
of course, with the reaction to the election of
Yeah,
Zoran Mamdani in New York City, right? I mean, where the fact that he is a Muslim, the fact, he's of course not Indian American in the sense that his origins are I mean, his parents have roots in India, especially his mother, but he himself was, you got this Ugandan Indian diaspora, broader Indian diaspora. But the reaction of a lot of Indian Americans, especially those who really do identify first and foremost as Hindus and pro Mr. Modi, right, was pretty negative, seeing him as being someone who they worried would be anti-India. So the Indian American community is not a monolith. It is complicated. Part of that success means that you do have a great diversity of political opinions. But I think we have to sort of be honest about the fact that at least some very prominent Indian Americans have chosen to be part of the MAGA agenda in ways that now might actually, the single biggest attacker of American universities, ironically, is Harmeet Dillon, who in her role for civil rights for the DOJ is going after American universities.
So, Ray Locker, if Trump decides to cast aside merit in the US system, as it were, whether it's in universities or jobs, and tries to block, where though immigrants who deserve to come in from coming in, what does that mean for America in the long run if merit is cast aside?
Well, I mean, if we base things on merit, Trump would never be president. I mean, everything about the man is a fiction. He's not a successful businessman. He's bankrupted six companies. I mean, so everything about him is fake and malignant. I mean, it's bad for the United States because it means that it doesn't matter how good you are. If you look different than a white person, you're not going to benefit from that. And so it means we don't attract good people. People don't want to come here. We lose business. We go asking for help on the world stage, and they turn away because we've shown who we really are. And that's always bad. And look, life is complicated, right? You need as many friends as you can to get by, to succeed. And if you treat people well, they'll treat you well in return. And this crowd has forgotten that, if to the extent that they ever knew it in the first place. So going it alone is not a good thing. You don't want to be a pariah on the world stage, particularly when for decades we were the beacon for so many people. Now we're telling the world, no, we don't really mean it if you're not a white person.
I think you summed that up really well. Ray Locker, Professor Nooruddin, thank you very much for joining us on DeKoder today as we look at the backlash against the Indian American community at this time in the US. We'll be back with much more on the program next week, looking at the fallout of Trump's trip to Davos. Never a dull moment there. And maybe by the time we meet next week, Greenland is a part of America or Iran has been bombed or who knows. Let's see what happens. See you next week. Goodbye.